Hello, and welcome to our Fire of Love screening and conversation. If you're just joining us, we're so happy that you're here, whether you're joining us on Zoom or on YouTube Live. This is going to be a wonderful conversation and event tonight. My name is Amanda Sullivan. I work with the National Girls Collaborative Project, and I'll be introducing you to your host, and she'll be introducing you to your wonderful speakers in just a couple of minutes. But as folks are joining, I wanted to do a little bit of quick housekeeping. I wanted to ask that you all stay muted and keep your videos off except for our speakers, but you are welcome and encouraged to talk away in the chat, and there will be time set aside in this event, a lot of time. This event is all about conversation. So there'll be plenty of time to ask your questions, and we will be passing those along to the speaker. And we also wanted to let you know that live transcript has been enabled. So if you need any help seeing that transcript, you can go ahead and message me, Amanda Sullivan, in the chat. And we are going to be recording this event, and I will be starting that recording in just a moment. And I'm really looking forward to all of us getting started. Hello, welcome to our Fire of Love screening and conversation. If you're just joining us, my name is Amanda Sullivan. I work with the National Girls Collaborative Project, and we are so thrilled to be bringing the two panelist speakers that we have tonight, our wonderful hosts, to chat about this wonderful documentary and about volcanoes. Who doesn't want to talk about volcanoes? I know at least Jess Phoenix definitely does, and I'm really thrilled for us to be having this conversation tonight. Before we get started with our panelists and hearing about their journey and what they've created, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the National Girls Collaborative Project and who we are and what we do, in case you're joining us for the first time for your first online event with us. But we are a national network of diverse stakeholders who are advancing the agenda in gender equity. We bring together organizations that are committed to informing and encouraging girls to consider STEM. As a network of networks, our reach is broad. The programs in our network serve 20 million girls. And because many of our programs also serve boys, we reach more than 12 million boys as well. And we've been doing this for 20 years. And our vision at the heart of it is really simple. We hope to create STEM experiences that are as diverse as the world we live in. We aim to create change. Our work empowers providers, educators, leaders, and youth themselves. And we believe that STEM skills can be acquired by anyone and fostered in everyone. Our initiatives build confidence and create a community of lifelong STEM activators. If that sounds interesting to you, if that sounds like something you want to be a part of, we will share in the chat a few ways you can stay connected with NGCP, such as through our newsletter or through our upcoming webinars and events. But now, the reason why we're all here, I'm thrilled to introduce you to your host for this evening, and I know she is thrilled to introduce you to our amazing speakers. Let me introduce Nancy Scales-Coddington, Director of Strategic Partnerships at NGCP, and I'll let you take it away, Nancy.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. We are so glad that you are here with us this evening. Please do take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're tuning in from. We love to see the participants from all over the country. As Amanda said, we are a national network and we love connecting with everyone across the country. Thank you, Amanda. She's going to be monitoring our chat tonight for questions. So please make sure that you're using the chat to ask questions for our guests this evening. We are also streaming on YouTube, and my colleague Candid Mack is over on YouTube, and she will be grabbing your questions there as well. If you cannot see the chat and you are tuned in on YouTube, that means you're in the full screen mode. So you just either need to refresh your screen or exit that full screen mode, and then the chat should appear on your right-hand side. So I want to thank you so much for tuning into our screening this evening of Fire of Love. We are thrilled that we have our two amazing people that are going to be speaking here with us this evening, and I'm about to go ahead and introduce them. But Fire of Love is a story of intrepid French scientists Katia and Maurice Krafft both volcanologists who died just as explosively as they lived, capturing the most spectacular imagery ever recorded of their greatest passion, volcanoes. Katia and Maurice Krafft loved two things, each other and volcanoes. And for decades, the daring French volcanologist couple roamed the planet, chasing eruptions and documenting their discoveries. Spoiler alert, ultimately, they did lose their lives in 1991 in a volcanic explosion, but they left a legacy that forever enriched our knowledge of the natural world, and they left behind footage that we are actually going to be taking a look at this evening. This is an amazing story of creation and destruction, and we have the filmmaker of the Academy Award nominated Best Documentary Feature Film, and she is our director and filmmaker, Sara Dosa. Welcome for joining us, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me, Nancy. It's really an honor to be here.
Well, we are thrilled that you are here to join us. And alongside Sara, we have volcanologist and science ambassador for the Union of Concerned Scientists, Jess Phoenix. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, thanks, Nancy. This is super exciting.
It is super excited. I'm thrilled to have both of you here for this conversation tonight. And so before we really dive deep into the fire of love, I thought it might be great for us to actually cue up this a little bit about the show for those who actually have not seen that. So we are going to take a look at one of the videos. This is the intro that introduces our main characters of Fire of Love, and we are going to take a look at that here in just 1 second. So here's our introduction of Fire of Love.
Katia et Maurice Krafft, sans doute le couple de volcanologues au monde qui a observé le plus grand nombre de volcans en activité.
Je vous souhaite un très bon lundi de Pâques en compagnie de Maurice et de Katia Krafft. Bonjour.
Le plus grand volcanologue au monde, c'est un tout petit bout de femme qui s'appelle Katia Krafft.
Tu vois, Stéphane, la plupart des volcans se trouvent à la limite entre les plaques.
Il me semble indispensable que vous voyiez ces images, que vous laissiez emporter par ce tourbillon de lave.
Maurice?
Hey.
Hello, boy. How are you?
Okay.
Well, the volcano is ready, waiting for us.
Yes. Okay.
Katia?
This is Katia, and this is Maurice. It's 1991, June 2nd. Tomorrow will be their last day. They will leave behind samples, words, hundreds of hours of footage, thousands of photos, and a million questions.
Quand vous restez sous les pierres, tous les deux, de quoi vous parlez?
So that's our intro to our characters. And I want to start with Sara. How did you first learn about Katia and Maurice Krafft and the work that they have done?
Yeah, so I first learned about Katia and Maurice actually when I was finishing up research for the last film I directed before Fire of Love. That film is called The Seer and the Unseen, and it tells the story of an Icelandic woman who's in communication with spirits of nature. Iceland, for those who aren't familiar, is a volcanic island, and we wanted to open The Seer and the Unseen with shots of erupting volcanoes in Iceland that had kind of an out of time feeling. So we started researching archival imagery of erupting volcanoes in Iceland, and not that many people had filmed that, but Katia and Maurice Krafft had. Once we saw their imagery, we were instantly captivated. There was something just paradigmatically different about the way they seemed to shoot. So we were really drawn in by that. But once we learned that they were also a couple in love with each other and utterly obsessed with the earth, we thought, wow, there's really a story here. I should say, though, that we kind of filed that in the back of our heads. And after we finished The Seer and the Unseen, we were set to work on a different film, a film about these mysterious methane explosions happening in Northwest Siberia. But we were going to go on our first scout in April of 2020. And we all know what happened then. So that project ended up falling apart as the world closed down. And my team and I decided to turn our attention towards archival filmmaking. And that's when we remembered that there's this amazing French couple who shot hundreds of hours of footage of erupting volcanoes, and we thought, let's look into that. So that's kind of how the ball got rolling.
That's great. And Sara, how long have you been making films?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been involved in filmmaking for about a little over 15 years now. Different roles, always kind of dreaming of being a director, but it took a long time climbing and working with mentors and working with an amazing team to finally kind of have my dream job directing films.
Thank you so much. And Jess, you have been familiar with the work of Katia and Maurice Krafft. When did you first learn about the work that they did?
It would have to be, it was in my intro geology class, Earth Revealed, that I took way back in the day, I think 2003, 2004, when I was an undergrad. And it's one of the most fundamental stories that you learn when you're studying earth science, even if you're not specifically diving into volcanology. Just doing the overview courses, everybody mentions it because 3 volcanologists died in that eruption. And it's one of the points that geology professors like to make, is that this science is still so raw, and we are still in, essentially, we've just entered the modern era of volcanology after the eruption of Mount St. Helens. So we are still learning. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, and the hazards are very, very real. And the Kraffts weren't the first, nor will they be the last volcanologists to have died trying to learn more about the earth.
And how long have you been involved in volcano research, Jess?
I began my volcano career in 2008. So we're coming up on 15 years this May, actually. And I started at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, working on Mauna Loa and Kilauea, Hualalai, and the other volcanoes there that aren't actually erupting at the moment.
What first attracted you to volcanoes?
The better thing I could say is what's not attractive about volcanoes.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, they are sheer unbridled nature at its finest. It is raw power, and it is so much vaster than any one person that I always actually find it reassuring in sort of a weird way when I'm standing there and like the wonder of the universe is just happening in front of me. Earth is creating itself, and nothing matters at that point. You just go, taxes, who cares? Oh, my ankle hurts, no big deal. You know, it's literally creation happening in front of you, and it happens at a molecular level, and we get to bear witness to it.
That's super exciting. As you said, though, it's like such a small part of geological time, going back to just Mount St. Helens, which we're gonna talk about in a little bit. Geology, the time is a big span, right? And we're just a tiny little blip.
When we operate on, 50 to 100-year scales and geologic time is 4.54 billion years, the volcanoes don't know that we're here, but we certainly notice them.
Right, for sure. Sara, so I want to talk about how this is all archival footage that you were able to obtain from the Krafts. Can you talk a little bit about the process of how you attained that footage, and how did you go about putting this story together?
Sure. Well, first, I just want to say I'm drinking out of a mug of Hawaii's volcano. So to find out that that's where you got your start, I was actually just there 3 weeks ago, giving a pilgrimage to Kilauea and Mauna Loa. So I just wanted to say that that's very cool. I love hearing about the beginnings of, your journey with volcanoes. For us and making Fire of Love, Nancy, to answer your question, we really wanted to have the Krafts telling their own story as much as humanly possible, which is very difficult when your protagonists have passed away, now coming up 32 years since they passed alongside Harry Glicken, the third volcanologist who Jess had mentioned that died at Mount Vinson in 1991. And in order to find the archival materials that they left behind, it took a team of people to work with to do that discovery. We were very lucky in that the bulk of the archives that the Krafts themselves shot, which was hundreds of hours of 16mm footage and just thousands of still photographs that Katia took. Most of that resided in an archival facility in Nancy, France called Image Est. And Image Est is a wonderful team, and the Krafft archive was really their kind of prized collection. They took such such care of the archives and kept them in this really pristine environment, and treated it with such love. And working with them, it was amazing because they knew it back and forth. So we could really say like, oh, Mathieu Rousseau, who's one of the main archivists there, what's your favorite shot? And he could know, from Iceland in 1973, there was an eruption. And I'll just say like the level of detail was incredible. And to not just get the footage from them, but their expertise and their care too, in navigating this extremely vast legacy, not just archive, but legacy that the Krafts left, it was really incredible. Aside from the about 200 hours that we were able to work with from Image Est, we had an archival producer named Nancy Marcotte, who was able to track down about 50 other hours of footage of Katia and Maurice appearing in front of other people's cameras. They were celebrities, especially in France in the 70s and 80s. And so they left quite an impressive visual footprint. And we were able to get access to a lot of their appearances on the news. They're on some really fun variety shows in the 70s. They even had a 6-part educational series that they themselves created for kids. And it was wonderful to work with that material because in the footage that they shot, they rarely appeared together since one of them was always behind the camera. And the 16mm footage that they shot also didn't have any sync sound. So the 50 hours that Nancy was able to track down was instrumental, not just showcasing their relationship, but getting at their personalities as well as their expertise.
That must have been amazing and challenging all at the same time, trying to put all those pieces together.
Absolutely. It was extremely challenging, and there was more limitations than we ever imagined going in. But it was so wonderful to work with their footage on every level. We were making this film during lockdown. And so the fact that we got to be transported around the world and to these extraordinary places we never imagined could exist it was more than thrilling. It felt kind of like a salve for our troubled souls to be dramatic. But the things that Jess was saying about kind of getting to witness creation in the making, we weren't standing on the lip of a crater, but we were able to still be captivated by the sense of wonderment and the power of creation by looking through their footage at a time when we were just especially filled with uncertainty and fear and the tumult that came with the early days of the pandemic.
Yeah, that must have been amazing. I mean, the footage is absolutely breathtaking. And if you haven't watched the film yet, there's still time. You can either watch it on Disney Plus, or we have a special screening link that we're going to put in the chat with the National Girls Collaborative Project in partnership with Motion Picture and National Geographic. So we'll put that in the chat. Talking about their relationship, I'd like to show another short clip that just showcases a little bit of the beginning of that relationship budding and how important everything you were just talking about, it really echoes and shares that.
Quand vous restez sous les pierres, tous les deux, de quoi vous parlez?
I don't think I was sharing the video. Sorry, give me 1 second.
I'm just glad I don't have to do your job, Nancy.
I appreciate that.
Quand vous restez sous les pierres, tous les deux, de quoi vous parlez?
Katia ne parle que de manger. C'est ce qui l'intéresse.
Il y a beaucoup de couples volcanologues dans le monde.
Oh, écoutez, je ne sais même pas s'il y en a. Non. De volcanologues à proprement parler, c'est extrêmement rare. En tout cas, moi, j'appelle volcanologue des personnes qui étudient les volcans actifs, par exemple. Et là, on peut dire qu'il n'y en a pas. Non. Ou alors peut-être qu'on ne les connaît pas. Mais je les plains. C'est très dur, deux volcanologues qui vivent ensemble. Parce que c'est très volcanique, donc franchement, ça fait des éruptions très souvent.
L'autre jour, justement, il se précipite sur un cône qui était actif.
Le Mauna Loa,
il était en train de se refroidir, donc à ce moment-là, il y a des fissures qui se forment dans ce petit cône. Ce n'est pas très grand, hein. Puis qu'est-ce qu'il a fait? Il est tombé dans un trou.
Et elle m'a poussé dedans.
They meet 19 years ago, in 1966. There's no definitive account of this first encounter, and the visual record of their budding romance is sparse. There's this photo, and these rose-tinted moments a few years later. Parts of Katia and Maurice's story remain lost to time. As in love, there are mysteries. You fall hard for what you know, harder for what you don't.
I love that clip because it just shows the tight-knit love that they had for each other, but also the work that they did, you know, that really came through in the footage. So I want to shift a little bit to talking about the work that they did. And, you know, Katia really was the photographer, and Maurice really caught a lot of the volcanoes and the content on film to advance their scientific work. And so, Jess, with some of the work that you've done, especially when you were talking about your intro to geology, how has the photography and the film that they have captured helped to make evacuation preparedness better, or helped the knowledge in the scientific community move forward?
So because volcanoes for a very long time were considered very unapproachable, largely because most cultures, I think every culture I know of that has volcanoes that have been active during when people have been around, they have myths and legends about volcanoes, and they're generally very forbidding. It's sort of like, you know, the creatures in the wild that have bright colors, usually a warning to stay away. Well, volcanoes have incandescent lava bombs they hurl at you, and that is also a good signal to stay away. So generally speaking, our accounts historically, starting with the very first written account that we know of, which was Pliny the Younger, when you know, Vesuvius erupted and buried Pompeii and Herculaneum in 79 AD. That's a super famous eruption. That was the first one that we had notes on, and Pliny the Younger was leaving. He was not running towards it. So volcanologists have to be on the either brave or foolhardy end of the spectrum, because a lot of volcanology for a long time, and it's shifting a little now with more remote sensing like satellite data and things like that, but a lot of it has been and still is very much boots on the ground, which means the lava is crunching under your feet. You can feel the heat radiating from active flows if it's a kind of eruption that you can walk right up to. If it's an explosive eruption, like the one that, you know, spoiler alert, sorry if you haven't watched the film, the one that killed the Krafts and Harry Glicken, that is something that you try to keep your distance from even today. And imagery of volcanoes is super helpful, because even until a few years ago, like, we knew that there was volcanic lightning from images. With the advent of more modern techniques, just within the last, I think it was 2 years ago, they proved that volcanic thunder is also a thing. So that's volcanoes generate their own weather. So imagery going back as far as we've been able to record it, whether it's things drawn on cave walls or actual amazing film documentary type footage, it's been incredibly helpful in our understanding of volcanoes, what they can do, whether or not it's something that they've done in our lifetimes. It's sort of it's a record. You compile it with the oral histories that exist, and it gives you a much better sense of the danger that is out there. And the Kraffts added a whole chapter to that book about volcanoes that we're still writing. You're on mute.
There's too many things. That is absolutely amazing. And one of the things that you had mentioned before we started tonight was the boots on the ground and how important it is to actually be where, you know, volcanoes are erupting and new land is forming. So can you talk a little bit about the work that you have done? Because you've traveled all over the world. I'll say chasing volcanoes because they're not really going anywhere. But with the work that you're doing, what is it you're looking for when you're actually going to the site where you have an active volcano?
So it all depends. And there's a history in geology, you know, our basically umbrella discipline that volcanology falls under. There's a history in geology, like a lot of sciences, of a lot of colonialism, where you get usually older white men parachuting into whatever exotic locale exists. And I put that in air quotes because it's not exotic to the people who live there, but then they tell them, we know so much more than you, get out of the way. And so a lot of my work has been media focused because I want to serve as a conduit for people in either scientific positions that haven't given them media experience, or if they are people who don't speak English as a first language or at all, if I can explain things to the audiences that are going to help drive interest and funding for more research, that's what I've been doing. So yeah, I've been out there sampling flowing lava that's 2000 degrees when you get up right close to it and your eyes dehydrate. But then I've also done programs for like Science Channel or Discovery Channel, where like I go to Indonesia or Tanzania or Nicaragua, and I get to explain the volcanoes' unique personalities, which is something that the Kraffts actually highlighted in the film. And it's funny because I had never seen them say that before until I watched the film. And I was like, I've been saying this for the last 15 years. Wow. Okay. So you know, it's kind of like there's universal truths in volcanology, even if they're not scientific truths. They are what we humans seem to make of them if we go enough times to have a look.
And volcanoes, because a lot of us don't have that experience to just drop in off of our personal helicopters with you as our guide, though that would be amazing. There's this mystery around them, right? And just the the lava flowing. It is very mysterious. And I think that just helps to keep that myth going with that. Another thing that you had mentioned earlier was talking about the sounds of lava. And we actually have another clip from the video that I'm going to play with some sounds of the lava. And then I would love just your perspective on how different those sounds can actually be. So is that really what the volcanoes sound like when you are that close to them?
There are a myriad of noises that volcanoes produce. And it's very much like a gas rushing sound, because there's gas and you've got the plastic solid, basically the magma that becomes lava once it's erupted, and it's spattering. So you're hearing a lot of spattering sounds. That's kind of that type of characteristic thing you get when you see spatter. They also, it's amazing. It's kind of like a symphony. When you are walking on fresh flows that have erupted maybe in the last couple of hours, the last day or two, depending on how hot they still are, depends on whether or not you could walk on them. Do you like your feet or not? But the fresh flows, volcanoes and what they produce, the lava is oftentimes very glassy. If you've heard of obsidian, they used to make arrowheads out of it. The indigenous Americans did. And then jasper is also related to that. But these are rocks that are super sharp and very glassy. So when you're walking over fresh lava and you're generally wearing big, thick work boots, the lava makes a sound like if you were stepping on like broken Christmas ornaments, glass ones. So it's just like a crunch, crunch, but it's very light and it tinkles almost. And that's actually the sound that lava makes as it flows. If you have an active, very slow moving flow, the big ropey ones you see a lot in Hawaii, those are they're very effusive eruptions. They spread out. It's like syrup running down the sides of the volcano, and they advance very slowly. And the top layer is cooling as it contacts the air. So it cools and then it breaks as the molten interior keeps pushing forward. So you can sit there and be absolutely silent and just film an advancing pahoehoe flow. That's what that's called. Pahoehoe. It's a Hawaiian word. And it sounds just like tinkle, 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 very glassy. And then my favorite volcano noise is when you are at the edge of a crater with an active lava lake beneath you. And I was really lucky because I got spoiled. Like 2 months into my career doing volcano work, I was right above the lava lake at Kilauea volcano that showed itself for the first time in 2008, first time in a while anyway. And I was standing there and I couldn't believe the sounds, because 150 feet below where I was standing, there's this fiery inferno of doom, right? And it's the molten interior of the planet. It's the Earth's heart. And the noises that it makes are not what you'd think. You think a lake, like, is it watery? Is it sloshy? Does it sound like that gas rushing spatter that we heard? No, it actually sounds, and this is back to the myths and legends thing I mentioned, it sounds like somebody hammering on metal. It's like boom, boom, and then you get some gas rushing, and then there's another clang. And you can totally see why the ancient Greeks and Romans said Hephaestus or Vulcan is the god down there, and he's the blacksmith god. So it's spectacular. They really are. They're Earth's symphony.
That's amazing. And how loud is that?
Loud enough that if you hear a particularly big bang, that the instructions for my supervisor at the time were just run. Just drop the equipment and run. And you're out there, and in the film, you see various types of protective garb or none at all, depending. And there's no amount of protective gear that will save you if you get a big explosion, even a relatively small one. In terms of what the volcano could do at its max, even a little one. If it ejects like a lava bomb, the size of a softball or a baseball, if that hits you in the head, like, you're gone. And a hard hat may or may not help. So we wore hard hats and like t-shirts and, high visibility vests, carried gas masks. And, you try to wear cotton clothing because you don't want anything with synthetic fibers, because as you get close to heat, it will melt, and you don't want like leggings melting to your skin. And you don't wear steel-toed boots too. Same reason your toes would cook. So you got to wear like leather boots. So there's a few specific things you wear to try not to die. But when you hear a really big bang, you just run.
That's interesting, because I was thinking, steel-toed boots, but that's a great point. So, how many layers of leather are in these boots that you wear? Is there like a special volcano section at the shoe store?
No, and it's funny because newbies to the field a lot of times will go out and buy like nice hiking boots at REI, and I take students out into the volcanic fields in the Mojave Desert here in California a lot, and it's still lava. It's just not moving, it's cooled. And I always tell them, like, no tennis shoes. You want to get really rugged boots. If you really want to invest in some nice ones, I get Caterpillar work boots. I go to like Work Boot Warehouse and get men's Caterpillar work boots in like the smallest size they have. And then those things I can probably do maybe like a month, 2 months of like everyday work on lava before they're shredded. I mean, the soles are just like, the leather stays though. I mean, I'm telling you, like a Caterpillar should sponsor Volcanologists. I'm just saying there's an opportunity there.
I'm just going to note that. A little shout out for them right there.
They have not paid me to say that, but they should.
And how close have you gotten to lava when you've been sampling it in your cotton t-shirt, in your Caterpillar?
I have pictures of this. They exist online too. If people go to my Instagram and scroll down, you'll see them. But this is a rock hammer. This is one of our best tools for sampling flowing lava. Another one is a steel bucket. But when you sample lava, this one has a pick end and then it has the end for cracking rocks open. This just allows you to like basically wedge things open. You sample with that end, and it's a single piece of steel, and it has this little coating for the grip. So it won't break. The head won't come off of it, which is the danger with a normal hammer, like a picture hanging framing hammer. So you basically just reach towards the lava, you stick this in and you pull the lava out like it's taffy. And I call it the taffy from hell. And then you get a little blob of it on the end of the hammer. And when you want to preserve the gases and the minerals that are inside that molten blob. And so you put it in basically a coffee can full of room temperature, regular water, and it hyperquenches. So the coffee can, actually the water in it will start boiling, and the sample cools, it preserves the gases and preserves the minerals. And then you go back to the lab and analyze it, and you find out what's going on in the Earth's guts.
This just leads me to more and more questions. So when you're putting that in the coffee can and the water's boiling, isn't there gases escaping that you're not capturing?
There is degassing on the surface, but when you go in to analyze it, you actually, sometimes you'll use a rock saw, you'll cut it open, sometimes you'll crush it down. There are ways we have to get the more pure gases out of there. And of course, the coolest thing would be is if we could put a probe down into the lava and get gas stuff that way, but we're not there yet. You can now, since the Kraft's time, when they were taking samples, there are some new methods. There's new technologies that allow you to kind of be a little further away, and then you get the gases that are being, wafted off in the giant plume that you often see. And so you can do that from a safer distance nowadays, thankfully.
Thank you so much. So Sara, you had talked about the footage not having sound to it, but we have this great footage here with the different sounds. Was that actually part of that footage, or was that something that needed to be added in post-production?
All of that actually was added when we were editing the film. 16 millimeter footage, which was the format that Katia and Maurice were shooting on, you have to record sound separately. And sometimes Katia was recording sound when Maurice was shooting. Sometimes they brought along other crew members who would take sound. But when we received the archive, we didn't get any of those sound files, and very little had actually remained. So it was extraordinarily laborious for my wonderful editors, Aaron Casper and Jocelyn Chaput, to begin editing, layering in sound as we were editing the picture too of the film. At first, we thought we could just edit the film only with picture, but this is a film about unpredictability, about the power of the earth, about creating personalities of volcanoes. As Jess mentioned, each of them have their own personalities, and sound plays such a constitutive role in all of those parts of storytelling. So we knew that we couldn't just edit with picture. We needed to weave sounds in. Aaron and Jocelyn and I did a tremendous amount of research. We wanted the sounds to feel scientifically accurate. That was really important to us. And at the same time, we wanted to have some subjectivity come into our sound design, as this is a creative documentary. Katia and Maurice had their own perception of volcanoes that, of course, was steeped in science, but also leaned into myth and their own opinions, their own kind of romance and idea of love. And they would often talk about volcanoes, not just as their loves, but also as kind of these monsters, these beasts that they were enchanted by. And there are some scenes where we decided to play with kind of these groaning, anthropomorphized sounds along with the scientific sounds to create that character of volcanoes that felt true to their perception, even if it wasn't necessarily, fact. There's one example I like to give, which when Katia and Maurice go to Anak Krakatau in Indonesia in 1979, Erin, one of my editors, she experimented with sound effects from a sound library entitled Dinosaur Sounds. And of course, there's no like T-Rex snarling at the base of Anak Krakatau, but the subtle hint of this kind of monstrosity, it added kind of this magically real dimension that felt true to how Katia and Maurice in their writings, as well as in their books and their interviews about Anak Krakatau seemed to experience it. And so that's one of the opportunities with documentary, and especially kind of creative nonfiction, which is kind of the loose area in which I like to work. You get to play with that kind of subjectivity still within kind of the bounds of science.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the footage is unbelievable. Can you talk about when you're putting that footage together, because this is older footage and that it was on 16 millimeter, what care did you have to take in post-production with that?
Sure. So luckily, we got to just work with digital. It would have been amazing to work with the actual hard celluloid of the 16 millimeter footage, but Image asked the archival facility in Nancy, France. They held on to all of that, and they actually painstakingly scanned everything for us. And then sent it over an FTP site to us working in the States. Since we were on lockdown, I didn't get to go to France until October 2021, and I dreamed of going there sooner than that, but they were sending everything over the internet, so we were able to work safely remotely during that time. That said, we took painstaking care ourselves. We wanted to really preserve the Kraft's aesthetic as much as possible. A lot of times when people work with 16 millimeter footage today, after they digitize it to the formats that we see on television, on the big screen and cinemas, they'll take away kind of sunspots or glares or the hairs and grains that show up on film as a physical media. However, for us, we really see time as a major theme in Fire of Love. Geologic time, the expansiveness, near immortality of volcanoes set against the fleeting kind of biological life of a human. And so that meant we wanted to preserve like grains and hairs, because those are all markers of time. That's what Katia and Maurice captured in that singular moment of geologic time, So I'll just say there was a lot of care in terms of the post-production process and treating it in a way that seemed to preserve their spirit, as well as that important theme in the film too. So I could go on and on about that, but we were trying to conjure them as much as possible to try to listen deeply, since they weren't next to us, but we couldn't do that direct conversation. So we had to pull in every possible way we could to bring their spirit, their essence, their way and their work into the process of storytelling.
Well, you did an absolutely amazing job as the awards have shown up and nominations. It's an absolutely beautifully done film. We have some questions from our audience that I would like to make sure that we get to. And this is for you, Sara. One thing that struck with me about Katia and Maurice was the amount of levity and fun that they seem to bring to their work. Often, I think people tend to think of science as very serious. And in fiction, scientists are often portrayed as either the mad scientist or the voice of reason. So do you feel that was an accurate portrayal of them as scientists, or did you take some creative liberties?
I love that question. Thank you to whoever asked that question. We feel like it's an accurate portrayal, and that's been something that has been corroborated by the people who knew the Krafts well, who we worked with on the film. I should say we did many interviews with collaborators, colleagues, family members of the Krafts, and all of that research went into the narration that we wrote, and very meaningfully shaped how we put together the film. And they watched it afterwards and kind of gave us their stamp of approval. And that's been by far the most gratifying and important part for our team is having their embrace of the film. But they would say that it felt like an accurate portrayal of them. And for us as a team, it was really important too, to showcase that their playful, quite frankly, hilarious way in the world. We had some guesses as to why they were so funny. First, I feel very lucky to have many friends who are scientists, and most of them are very funny too. Jess, this is the first time we're talking. I'm already finding you very, very funny and engaging. And so you are also clearly an example of this. But for Katia and Maurice, we felt like their proximity to death, the fact that they had this reconciled relationship about the dangers of their work, freed them from what they put in their own words as like the vanity of human things. That was a refrain that they often came back to, is like the vanity of human things. And they were able to kind of delight in the absurdity of what it meant to be human and alive, and also to celebrate kind of the fleeting nature of what it means to be on this planet. And that really enabled them to embrace the playful. They were also traveling all around the world, and humor is such an amazing way to just connect. It's so disarming when there's, the clumsiness of cross-cultural communication or cross-cultural miscommunications. Humor is often such a great way to diffuse. So I'll just say that I think it was also a tool in connecting with people from all around the world in these incredibly difficult situations. I'm really curious to hear what you think, Jess, about that too. And I would imagine there's all kinds of hilarity going on, on your expeditions and your work too.
It's 100% right. I mean, the Krafts were not unique in their sense of humor because of the fact that when you are working in these remote, dangerous conditions, like where one wrong move and you could die, but the work you're doing matters, so you need to be there. You have a kind of, let me borrow French from them. I'm not good at French, but je ne sais quoi. You're very much like comfortable. You have to reconcile yourself with the fact that we are mortal. And, as far as humans can tell, the planet isn't really, not the way that we are. So, if I'm ever feeling down, I'll say to my husband, like, the volcanoes will be here long after we're gone. And that actually makes me feel better. And then we also do really goofy stuff like that hammer I showed you. I've used it to roast marshmallows. I'm vegetarian, so I don't eat the marshmallows, but I give them to people. We've used it to pretend like we're doing axe throwing. When there's a lot of long nights when you're out in the field. We've baked cookies on the inside of the car dashboard out in the desert. You can heat a can of beans, you heat it up on your engine block. Your trucks always break down, always get stuck. You always have flat tires. So you better be good at changing a flat tire in 120-degree heat and with no other way to get back down off the volcano. So it's a little bit MacGyver. It's a little bit like fatalism, and it's a whole lot of just being goofy and ridiculous because it helps you get what is so important. It's what you came for. You got to make that happen no matter what.
I love that. I love that levity. And I think that really helps to transfer into your team and just makes the science more interesting, I think, for everybody. And that comes out in your work. That's great. Sara, we have another question from the audience. How did working on this during the pandemic affect your narrative?
Oh, another great question. Yeah. For us as a team, there's a couple of things. There's definitely kind of the narrative, the shape of the story, and there's also the process. In terms of the shape of the story, we were ourselves dealing with profound loss. I'll just say for me in my personal life, I was grappling with a significant loss in my own life, and getting met with these profound guides of who knew how to navigate uncertainty, who knew how to reconcile fear, who had a clarity of purpose and meaning in life, and who had a relationship with death and a relationship with fear. It's so interesting. Some people will say, were Katia and Maurice fearless? And I think, no, they weren't fearless, but they had a very complex relationship with fear. They understood it with these clear and nuanced eyes, and thus could kind of move with fear in an interesting way. And I think getting to learn about their work, getting to see the world literally how they saw the world through their cameras, and getting to read their writing and learn about their lives at a time of such loss and uncertainty, it really felt like kind of like the philosophy and the orientation towards meaning that I needed at that moment in time. And that was something that other members of my team were feeling too. And I think that infused our perspective and kind of sculpted our focus in approaching the material. And I think there's certainly strong kind of currents of existentialism throughout the film. That's something that both Katia and Maurice kind of embrace through kind of their words that show up in Fire of Love. And I think those were things that we were all really thinking of as a team. And then process-wise, I feel really lucky that during the pandemic, my 3 core members of the team essentially moved in with me. Erin, one of my editors, lives in New York. I live in Berkeley, California. She moved into this room that I'm sitting in now. I still call it Erin's room. Jocelyn, my other editor, she lives just up the hill from me in Berkeley. She was here all hours of the day and night. And Shane, one of my producers, who's also one of the writers on the film, along with me and Jocelyn and Erin, he pretty much moved in as well. And so the 4 of us kind of formed this little family, working day and night, kind of experimenting with ideas. There were so many limitations to the footage. I mentioned that there was no sound, but there's all kinds of others that I won't go into now, but figuring out how to use those limitations as creative opportunities with these 3 people who I just love so much and respect their creativity so much. That was a joy. We had so much fun with each other. And so we were also really trying to embrace Katia and Maurice. So just to go back to the question about humor, I feel like getting to be potted up during this time with these people who I love so much, who are so funny, I think some of that also kind of, at least it's our hope that you can feel our joy in approaching the material in the film itself.
Thank you. One of the things that we haven't touched on yet that I really would love to dive into is that representation of women in STEM. And when you and I, Sarah, were talking earlier about looking at the footage and between Maurice taking the film and Katia doing a lot of the photography, was there an imbalance of who was actually on screen more than the other?
There absolutely was. Not so much in the footage that Katia and Maurice themselves took. It was actually, there was more Katia in the footage because oftentimes Katia was used for scale. You know, that there's one scene in the film where you have like Katia's this little speck and then the camera zooms super wide to just show like the vastness of this one crater. And that was something that they did often because they were using their footage as teaching tools to show people kind of scale and profundity and against kind of the human. However, in front of other people's cameras, there was much more of Maurice. And largely that was dictated by extreme sexism. There was one clip that's not actually in the film, but it taught us so much. And it was a moment when Katia and Maurice are on this kind of like this panel of different scientists, and the host basically says, "We're so lucky tonight we have with us here one of the world's leading scientists, Maurice Krafft. She's an adventurer." That just goes on about Maurice and says Maurice Krafft and his wife Katia. And you can just see Katia's like jawline just like tighten. And it's just, and Katia had seen more active volcanoes than Maurice. And I'll just say she encountered sexism constantly. And she really didn't enjoy being on camera because she was often met with these kinds of things. And so that allowed her actually to be even more, I shouldn't say allowed her to be, she chose to be more in the field because she so detested kind of these public speaking things where she encountered such sexism. But that was something for us as a filmmaking team. We wanted to kind of write that historical record. And luckily, Katia was a prolific writer, and she was the primary author of many of the books that the Kraffts authored. And so we got to pull kind of first person writings from these books and had an actor voice them to try to make sure that she was there just as much as Maurice, and we didn't let that historical injustice be replicated in our own retelling of the Kraffts story as well.
Well, I think you did a really great job with that. You know, women in STEM are definitely underrepresented, especially in the geoscience. It's a global and persistent problem. You know, looking at just the numbers in the geoscience professions in the US, only 24% of working geoscientists are women, and that's from 2017. So Jess, can you talk a little bit of your own experience of that lack of representation of women in the field that you work in?
So I was really lucky because when I started at HBO, one of the most amazing volcanologists who had been there for a long time was wrapping her career up. Her name was Christina Helliker. And so it was like, oh yeah, of course there were women here who do the work and they're awesome. So the people who have mentored me have largely been men, and they have largely been extremely welcoming. Bear in mind, I am white and cis, able-bodied, that whole thing. So, people's mileage varies based on their identity. Still, it's a big deal. But what I do hear a lot is with all the media that I do. And I can't tell you, I could say it's more than 5 times when myself or my manager or my agent for doing TV and film stuff has been in a conversation with an executive at a TV channel or at a network. And they're like, okay, so here's the great show pitch we have. Jess can be the host. And they go, oh, no one will believe you're a scientist. You're too young and you're a woman. And I'm like, excuse me? Still 15 years on, you're still saying this? How much younger can I possibly be? I'm 41. Like, it's not going backwards. So it still exists. And if you think about the hosts on the popular science shows that are out there right now, people go, oh, the redheaded girl on Mythbusters. And I'm like, that's not a field scientist. And you get these people trying to push back. When the Village Voice did a profile on me like a year and a half ago, they called me the new Indiana Jones. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But the closest thing we've got right now in pop culture that comes to the tip of everyone's tongue is, ooh, Tomb Raider, Lara Croft. And I'm like, yeah, no. So we have a lot of work to go, and the representation is still an issue. And I've done a lot of work trying to open doors for people who would not traditionally have access to the kind of field science opportunities that I have had. And it's really important. We can't stop because the scientists look like the places where the science is happening. So, you go to Indonesia and guess what? The volcanologists are Indonesian. It's like, wow, who would have thought? So we need to actually have these major, especially American TV networks, showing local scientists, and then people who look like them will think, oh yeah, this is attainable because they're out there. And I just want to amplify that. I mean, and it's great that you did that, Sara, with the film, and you made sure that Katia wasn't just pushed to the side, because they were very much a team, and that's widespread knowledge among volcanologists.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jess, can you talk about, you have a new project coming up. You have a new podcast actually dropping today. Can you share a little bit about that?
So just furthering my efforts in science communication and making science more accessible, I started working on this with the Union of Concerned Scientists. I'm now their science ambassador, which also means that I not only get to make jokes about how concerned I am about everything, which is great. I have a teenager. I'm very concerned, but I get to talk to really cool people about fascinating things. And it's everything from like food justice to electric cars to natural disasters. And it's basically, the Union of Concerned Scientists said, do what you want with a podcast, as long as it touches on kind of what we're working on. New podcast is called This Is Science with Jess Phoenix. And it is, all the social handles are like at Science with Jess, because it's real, don't try to write out This Is Science. It's very hard to do that for social. But yeah, so it came out today, and I'm always working on trying to put expeditions together to do different scientific objectives. But yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see what Sara does next, though, honestly. And I hope she comes back to the dark side of the geosciences for more wonders of nature, because I probably have a list a mile long if you need any inspiration.
Consider me inspired.
What is next for you, Sara?
Next, well, hopping aboard one of Jess's expeditions. Fingers crossed. That sounds awesome. Immediately next, I'm actually doing my first foray into scripted work. I'm going to be adapting a podcast that's similar in theme, actually. Much smaller in scale. It looks at kind of, I'll just say I'm going to be writing, I'm going to be, doing a writing project next about this really exciting story. But yeah, I'm so endlessly fascinated by how humans make meaning with non-human nature, and volcanoes have totally spoiled me for that, because as Jess started off saying, like, there's nothing more powerful than volcanoes. And so, I'm hooked, but I will always, I hope to always work on telling stories, uplifting stories that really showcase the sentience of our planet, especially at a moment of such critical demise, but also potential for change. So that's kind of what I always hope to do next.
That is super exciting. So I think everybody should stay tuned for the expeditions of Jess, Sara, and I'm coming along. So it's gonna be amazing. I want to thank both of you so much for spending this past hour. It has gone by so incredibly fast. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences and your resources with us. I'd also like to thank Motion Picture and National Geographic for their support in hosting this screening event. Thank you to Amanda Sullivan and Candid Mack and the NGCP team. This event will be available on the National Girls Collaborative Project's YouTube channel, so please subscribe for future exciting events. I would also like to invite you to attend our next NGCP online event. It's a webinar on breaking stereotypes through children's books, and the link will be in the chat. If you enjoyed this event, please consider supporting the work of the National Girls Collaborative Project. We will put that link in the chat as well. Lastly, we do have a survey that is going to launch as soon as this ends. We really appreciate if you could take a few moments to give some feedback for those who helped make this happen. Thank you so much for attending. We hope to see you at our next event. I'm Nancy Scales-Coddington. Have a good night.